The diner's neon light flashed coldly on my son's phone screen. The text popped up right next to his uncut steak. "It's done? She has no idea?" I looked up, swallowing hard. If it was done, what was it? My house? My money? Or my granddaughter's future? His smile didn't reach his eyes. I smiled back and started the countdown. My name is Marjorie Hale. I am 62 years old, and for 40 of those years, I have lived in this blue cottage with the white trim, here in Port Oriel. My late husband and I built this house, board by board. The grain of the wood on the porch railing feels like an extension of my own palm. I am a seamstress, a good one. And this house was my sanctuary, my workshop, and my ledger. 3 years ago, my son, Caleb, lost his job as a leasing agent. He and his wife, Sloane, and my granddaughter, Piper, showed up on my doorstep with 3 suitcases and a story of bad luck. "Just 6 months. Mom," Caleb promised, his eyes avoiding mine. He was 39 then, still my boy, but with a shadow I did not recognize. Just until we get back on our feet. 3 years is a long time to be off your feet. At first, it was lovely. It had been quiet for so long. The house filled with the smell of Sloane's waffles on Sunday mornings and the sound of 8-year-old Piper's cartoons. Piper and I would water the sea daisies that lined the front walk. Her small, serious face, concentrating on the watering can, reminded me so much of Caleb at that age. It felt like a family again. Then the small shifts began, quiet as a hem slipping its stitches. Sloane started in the kitchen. She called it optimizing. My grandmother's cast-iron skillet was moved to the back of a cabinet I could no longer reach. My spices were rearranged alphabetically, which meant I could never find the paprika. Then she announced she was putting a new lock on the big shed in the backyard. "The damp is terrible for your old fabrics." "Mom," she'd said, not looking at me. "And we need a secure place for Caleb's work things." My high-end silks and bolts of Irish linen were moved to the attic. The shed became their storage unit. Soon after, she started using the joint grocery card, the one I funded, intended for family meals for things that never made it to the dinner table. Bottles of wine I never drank, expensive face creams, magazines. When I glanced at the receipts, she would just smile. "We all have to chip in." Right. The bills were the next thing. The water bill nearly tripled. The electric bill soared. I am a woman who turns off lights when she leaves a room. They were not. "I'll cover the difference, Mum," Caleb would say, tapping at his phone. "Next month. I'll get it all squared away." Next month never came. When I would bring the statements to him, he would suddenly need to make an urgent call, or he would simply look at me, his face blank, and say, "I thought we settled this." The worst day was 6 months ago. Sloane and Caleb sat me down in my own living room. "Marjorie," Sloane began. She had a way of using my name that felt like a correction. "The 3 of us are just so cramped in the guest room, and Piper is getting bigger. It just makes more sense for us to take the master bedroom." I looked at Caleb. He just shrugged, looking at the floor. "It's just practical." "Mum, we need the space and the bathroom." My bedroom, the room I had shared with my husband for 30 years. The room where the morning light hit the sewing table just right. That night, I moved my things into the small spare room downstairs, the one next to the pantry, the one that shared a wall with the rumbling, groaning water heater that kicked on at 5 in the morning. It was the following week I heard it. I was in the kitchen, and Sloane was on the phone in the hall, talking to one of her friends. I know. She'd laughed, a sharp, brittle sound. No, Marge is fine with it. She barely notices anything these days. Marge. Not Mom. Not even Marjorie. Just Marge. It landed like a small, cold stone. It was a line drawn. I was no longer the mother, the owner, the matriarch. I was Marge. An obstacle. A piece of furniture they had to navigate around. That night, I went to my desk and pulled out a new linen-covered notebook, the kind I use for my most complex dress patterns. I opened it to the first page. I did not write household expenses. I wrote debts. I started cataloguing everything. The $5 coffee Sloane bought every morning, the $20 surge on the water bill, the $40 in groceries that were just hers, the small withdrawals from the joint account, always just under the amount that would trigger an alert, the small leaks, the tiny cuts. I wrote them all down. The numbers were not small. They were obsessive, and they were terrifying, and they were adding up to something I could no longer ignore. The pressure in the house was no longer just a feeling. It had a physical weight. It started with the metal box. I keep it on the high shelf in my sewing room closet, behind the hat boxes. It holds the deed to the house, my late husband's savings bonds, and Piper's christening certificate. I went to get a bond to cash for Piper's birthday, and the box was gone. My heart didn't just sink, it seized. I searched the closet for an hour, my hands shaking, my breath thin. I was sure they had taken it. I went downstairs, ready for a confrontation I knew I would lose, and I saw it. It was sitting on the bottom shelf of the living room bookcase, partially tucked behind a row of Sloane's paperback thrillers. I opened it. Everything was there. But it was messy. The papers, usually crisp and ordered, were shuffled. Someone had been through it and put it back in the wrong place, carelessly, as if I wouldn't even notice the box itself was missing from its proper spot. A week later, a letter came from my bank. It was a standard-looking notification. Dear Marjorie Hale, recent adjustments have been made to your online access preferences. I stared at the words. I do not bank online. I pay my bills with paper checks at the post office. I called the bank's main number, enduring 20 minutes of hold music. The representative was polite, but confused. Yes, ma'am, he said. The request was confirmed last Tuesday to link a secondary user to the account for monitoring purposes. I hung up. Secondary user. Monitoring purposes. The mail became a source of daily anxiety. I started walking to the mailbox at 10:30, right when the mail carrier, Tom, usually arrived. Just so I could get it before Sloane did. That is how I found the HELOC offer. It was a slick, colourful flyer from a mortgage company I'd never heard of. You're pre-approved, use the equity in your Port Oriel home. We had paid this house off in 1998. I had never considered borrowing against it, but someone else was. I put the mailer on the kitchen table and waited for Caleb. When he came in, I held it up. What is this? He barely glanced at it. Junk mail. Mum, everyone gets them. He opened the refrigerator, looking for something. It feels different. Caleb. First the bank. Now this. He sighed. A long, theatrical sound of impatience. Mom, you've been a little forgetful lately. Remember last week when you couldn't find your glasses and they were on your head? I had not been wearing my glasses. They had been in my sewing room, where I left them. I am not forgetful. Caleb? It's okay, he said. his voice softening into that placating tone I was beginning to hate. It happens. Sloane and I were just talking. Maybe it's time we looked into helping you with the finances. You know, just a simple guardianship, to make things convenient, to protect you. Protect me. The words hung in the air, acidic. I tried Sloane later that day. I found her in the kitchen, scrolling through her phone. Caleb mentioned guardianship, I said, my voice tighter than I intended. Sloane looked up, her smile strained, like it pained her face. Oh, Marge, it's just a formality. At this age, safety is the most important thing. We just want what's best for you. The confirmation came from the one person who didn't mean to give it, Piper. She was sitting on the porch steps with me, drawing in a notebook. I'm drawing my new room, she said, concentrating on a purple crayon. That's lovely. Honey, is that your room upstairs? She shook her head, not looking up. No, silly. My room at the new house. Mommy bought new curtains for it. They're yellow. I stopped breathing for a second. The air in my lungs turned to ice. The new house. Sweetie, are you moving? She finally looked at me, her eyes wide, suddenly realizing she'd said something wrong. Mommy said not to tell. It's a secret. She snapped the notebook shut. The house was no longer mine. Not really. Every Saturday. Sloane hosted parties. The backyard, my quiet garden space, filled with strangers, people I didn't know, with loud voices and louder music, trampling the sea daisies. They used my guest towels in the bathroom and left sticky rings on my porch railing. My home had become Sloane's weekend clubhouse. I stayed in my small room by the water heater, the thumping bass vibrating through the thin wall. Yesterday, I was checking the mail, my hands still trembling from Piper's comment. My neighbor from across the street, Ruth Delgado, was walking her small dog. Ruth is 67, a retired paralegal, and she sees everything. She nodded at me, a sharp, knowing look. She didn't stop, but as she passed my driveway, she let a small, folded piece of paper drop from her hand. I waited until she was 2 doors down before I bent to pick it up. I unfolded it in my kitchen. Her handwriting was neat, precise. If you need a witness, I am right across the street. Caleb invited me to dinner at the Harbour Grill. It was a Tuesday, and the gesture was so unusual it felt like a threat. He said he wanted to talk, just the two of us, about the future. I knew what that meant. He wanted something. Sloane must have coached him, sent him in to handle the old lady. The Harbour Grill smells of fried oysters and stale beer. We sat in a booth with cracked vinyl, the red neon sign outside pulsing against the dark windows. I watched Caleb. He placed his phone on the table, but face down. That was new. In the past 3 years, his phone had been an extension of his hand, the screen always bright, always demanding his attention. Tonight, it was a closed door. He was hiding something. A young waitress came over, tired and efficient. "What can I get you, folks?" Caleb ordered the steak. He was using my money, after all. I just asked for the clam chowder. As the waitress turned away, Caleb leaned in, starting his practiced speech. "Mom," he began, "Sloane and I are worried about you." My spine stiffened. I stirred my water with my straw, watching the ice cubes clink. "You know, with the house, it's a big asset, and if something were to happen—" The waitress returned, balancing the heavy plates. She set my chowder down, and then the large platter in front of Caleb. The platter hit the table with a solid thud. The phone vibrated. The screen lit up. It was only for a second, but I am a seamstress. My entire life is built on observing details, the thickness of a thread, the alignment of a pattern. I saw it all. The contact name was T.H. Holdings. The message preview read, "It's done. She has no idea." Caleb flinched, his hand darting out to flip the phone back over to its face-down position. But it was too late. He had seen me see it. I did not gasp. I did not ask him who T. Holdings was. I picked up my spoon. I looked at my chowder. I felt my face settle into a mask of mild confusion, the one I used when customers tried to explain a complicated dress design. "Pardon, dear," I said, as if I had missed what he said before the interruption. "You were saying something about the house." He was rattled. He had lost his rhythm. "Oh, yes. Just legal stuff. Mum, protection." I opened my purse. You know, my lipstick feels dry in this air conditioning. I pulled out my small, silver compact mirror. I clicked it open. I pretended to check my mouth, but I angled the mirror just slightly. I could see the reflection of his phone on the tabletop. He was tapping a reply, his thumb moving fast, his body angled away from me. I pulled my own phone from my purse, placing it in my lap, below the table line. I turned on the camera. "You really think I need protecting, Caleb?" I asked, my voice calm. I was just a woman checking her makeup. "It's for the best, Mum. We were thinking co-ownership. It just simplifies the paperwork, avoids probate if, you know." He was looking at me, earnest, his eyes pleading. He was a bad liar. He always was. While his eyes were locked on mine, trying to sell me this fantasy. My thumb pressed the button on my phone. I took a picture of his screen, angled just right. It was blurry, but the name T.H. Holdings was clear. I took another. I snapped the compact shut. Well, that is a lot to think about. I put my phone back on the table, this time face up. "You know my memory, Caleb. It is not what it used to be." This was the line he and Sloane loved to use. I might as well use it too. "I am just going to open my note app," I said, tapping the screen, "so I can remember what you're suggesting. Can you just repeat that part about probate?" I pressed the small microphone icon. The audio recording began. He smiled. He thought I was doddering. He thought I was confused and compliant. "Of course, Mum." And then he explained everything. He talked for nearly 10 minutes. He talked about avoiding taxes. He talked about managing my expenses. He talked about how Sloane felt it was the only fair way to manage the family asset. He contradicted himself 3 times, but his voice was sincere, practiced, and devastating. The recording captured every single word. When we got home, the house was dark except for the blue light of the television in the living room, where Sloane was asleep on the couch. I went to check on Piper. She was in her bed, in what used to be my bedroom. She stirred when I opened the door. "Grandma." "I'm here, sweetie. Go back to sleep." She sat up, rubbing her eyes. "The lady with the red hair was here again today," she whispered. My blood, which had been pounding in my ears, went instantly cold. "What lady?" "Piper. The measuring lady. She was using a big ruler in the kitchen. Mommy told me not to bother her. She said we have to be very quiet when the measuring lady is here. I forced a smile. My face felt like cracking plaster. It's all right, honey. It was probably just someone for the insurance. Go to sleep. I kissed her forehead. I went to my small, damp room by the water heater. I sat on the edge of the cot. I did not turn on the light. I pulled out my linen notebook. I turned to a new page. At the top, I wrote, Worst case scenario list. The first entry. They are not just borrowing against the house. They are selling it. The second, T.H. Holdings, is the buyer. It is a shell company. The third, the lady with the red hair, is an appraiser. The fourth, they are forging my signature to do it. I closed the book. The house was silent, except for the heavy sound of the water heater kicking on, and the quiet, steady click of my own mind. Calculating. Cutting a new pattern. The next morning, I walked across the street before Sloane or Caleb were awake. Ruth Delgado opened her door before I even knocked, a mug of strong coffee in her hand. She just looked at me, her eyes missing nothing. I need that witness. Ruth, I said. And I think I need a lawyer. She nodded, her expression grim. I was afraid of this. His name is Avery Keene. He's with Keene and Weller. He specializes in financial abuse of seniors. He's not cheap, but he's a shark. You call him today. Do not wait. I met Avery Keene at his office in town 2 hours later. It was all glass and steel, which made me nervous. But his handshake was firm and his eyes were sharp. He looked to be in his late 40s, and he wore a suit that was impeccably tailored. He listened without interrupting for 20 minutes as I laid out the story. I gave him the linen notebook. I showed him the blurry photo of the text message. I played him the audio recording of Caleb's dinner speech. Keene did not react emotionally. He simply swiveled to his computer. Let's start with T.H. Holdings, he said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. It took him less than 5 minutes. Here it is, he said, turning the monitor toward me. T.H. Holdings, LLC, formed 6 weeks ago. The address is a private mail drop service over in Annapolis. He clicked another link. And the registered agent is a Mr. Julian Ritter. Ritter, I asked, the name clawing at me. Any relation to Sloane? My stomach turned. That's her maiden name. It's her cousin. He lives in Delaware. A shell company, Marjorie, Keene said, his voice flat, factual. Set up to buy your house, likely for pennies on the dollar, with them controlling both sides of the transaction. He made a call. He had me sign a release form, and within an hour, he had a digital copy of my complete file from the bank. He spread the papers on his desk. They've been busy. He pointed to a line item. Here. A draft application for a home equity line of credit. A HELOC. For $50,000. I never signed that. I know. He pulled out a small magnifying glass, looked at the signature line on the document, and then at the check I had written him for the retainer. Your signature has been scanned and pasted. The resolution is slightly off. It's a good forgery, but it's a forgery. He pointed to the notary stamp on the same page. And this is where they got sloppy. The notary is listed as Darla Pike. Her certification expired in March of last year. This document is fraudulent on its face. He kept digging. He pulled up my bank statements. They've been warming the account, he said. He showed me 3 transfers, all small, all under $500, moving from my savings to Caleb's personal checking. The memo line on each one was identical: utilities. My utility bills are never the same exact amount, I whispered. Exactly. This is to create a pattern, to make it look like you're routinely giving him money. It's poisoning the well, making you look like an unreliable financial manager. Keane picked up his phone again. I'm bringing in Noah Brandt. He's a private investigator. We need to know who the measuring lady is. Noah Brandt was the opposite of Keane. He was rumpled, smelled faintly of coffee, and looked like he hadn't slept. But he got an answer in 90 minutes. He called Keane's office line. Keane put him on speaker. The red-haired woman is Trey Hollis. Brandt's voice crackled. She runs a boutique firm called the Trey Hollis Group. They specialize in off-market, private listings. I made a call pretending to be a developer. Hollis confirmed she was at your address yesterday for a private appraisal. She has another one scheduled for this afternoon at 3. This afternoon. They were moving that fast. Keane looked at me, his face set. Marjorie, this is no longer a family dispute. This is a criminal conspiracy to defraud you of your home. We need to act now. I am filing for an ex parte temporary protective order for your assets. It freezes your accounts, freezes the title of your house. Nothing can be sold or transferred. I am also advising we prepare a restraining order. If Caleb or Sloane become aggressive when they find out, we'll need it. What do I do? I felt small, like I was back in that tiny room by the water heater. You go home, Keane said. You act normal. You said Sloane is having one of her parties this weekend. Saturday, I said. She calls it a neighborhood get-together, but it's just her friends. Perfect, Keane said, a thin, cold smile on his face. Parties make people careless. They talk. They brag. Noah will be there. Across the street with Ruth. Long lens camera. We let them gather. We let them expose themselves. Get them on audio. On video. I will have the asset order signed by then. When we have enough, we'll serve them. Right in the middle of their celebration. I'll arrange for a police escort. I nodded, my hands clenching in my lap. One more thing, Keane said. He handed me a small, black USB drive. Go home. Go to the library or a copy shop. Not your home computer. Scan every page of that linen notebook. Scan the bank letters. Upload the audio file. Put copies of everything on this drive and on a secure cloud server. I have my copies. But we need redundancy. We need insurance. I left his office and went straight to the copy shop. I did exactly as he said. I drove home, my heart a cold, hard knot in my chest. I walked across the street. I handed the USB drive to Ruth. This is the insurance, I told her. I'll keep it safe. Marjorie, she said, slipping it into her apron pocket. You just get ready for Saturday. Saturday arrived with a metallic brightness I found nauseating. Sloane was in the backyard, directing the placement of cheap balloons. She had hired a DJ, and by 2 p.m, synthesized bass was thumping through my walls, shaking the delicate teacups on my shelves. She'd sent out an email blast, calling it a neighborhood bonding party. I hadn't seen a single neighbor. It was just her crowd loud, dressed in expensive casual wear, and drinking my money in the form of craft beer. My first priority was Piper. I set her up on the front porch, far from the backyard chaos, with her sketchbook and a new set of 64 crayons. You're the official lookout, sweetie, I told her, my voice light. You have to draw every car that goes by. She took the job seriously. Across the street, I saw Ruth's curtains twitch. Ruth was sitting in her front window, watching Piper. My granddaughter was safe. I walked back through the house, the walls vibrating. In my pocket, my fingers brushed against the small, cold rectangle of the mini recorder Avery Keene had given me. My other hand nervously checked my phone, which I'd set to vibrate only. Through the kitchen window, I saw her. The red-haired woman, Trey Hollis. She was standing near the barbecue, holding a seltzer water, listening to Sloane. She was not dressed for a party. She was in a sharp blazer, as if she'd just come from a closing. As I watched, a man in a golf shirt joined them. I slid the back door open just a crack, the music nearly covering their voices. But I heard the words. The man clapped Caleb on the back. Trey Hollis raised her glass, her voice crisp. The appraisal is locked. It's a clean pocket listing. No one will even know it hit the market until it's done. My house. A pocket listing. Mom. Caleb called, spotting me. He was flushed, already a few beers in. He walked over, holding a new, grey leather document folder. He held it up like a trophy. See, all the paperwork is ready to go, just like we talked about. Nice and simple. This was it. The performance. I let my shoulders slump. I brought a trembling hand to my temple, leaning against the doorframe, right under the new doorbell camera I'd had installed yesterday, citing neighborhood security. "Oh, Caleb," I said, my voice thin and reedy. "It's so much. The music is so loud." "What papers?" "Dear." I looked past him, as if searching. "Sloane, can you—" Sloane glided over, her smile like a shark's. She put her arm around my shoulders. It felt like a yoke. "It's just the protection paperwork. Marge, remember." Her voice was saccharine, dripping with false patience. All of it aimed at the doorbell camera I was pretending not to know about. "To keep you safe. To make sure the house stays in the family. We're just adding our names to help you manage it." "Manage," I repeated, letting my eyes go vague. "But it's my house." "Of course, it is," Caleb said, patting my arm. "This just formalizes our help." As he lifted his hand to pat me, his Apple Watch lit up. A group message notification. I saw Sloane's name at the top. The preview text was bright and sharp. "Garage lock drilled documents secured." The garage. The one Sloane had put a new lock on, where she'd moved my old filing cabinets, the original deed, my husband's bonds, the metal box. They hadn't just copied my signature. They had drilled into my private storage to get the originals. My phone vibrated in my left pocket, a sharp buzz against my hip. I kept my hand in my right pocket, my thumb making sure the recorder was still on. I kept my eyes on Sloane's face. I think I need to sit down," I whispered. "Of course, Marge," Sloane said, steering me toward a chair. "Caleb, get her some water." As they both turned, I pulled my phone out. A text from Keene. "Order is signed. Asset freeze is active. Officers are standing by 2 blocks away. Give the signal." I needed to wait. Not yet. I saw Trey Hollis detaching herself from the party. She walked calmly down the side path, right past me. She didn't look at me. She walked to the front gate. She stopped on the public sidewalk and lifted her phone, taking a clear picture of the front of my house, capturing the address numbers. Then, she walked directly to the keypad by the garage door, the one Caleb had installed. She took a close-up picture of the keypad, then another of the lock. She was documenting access for the new owners, for T.H. Holdings. She turned and saw me watching. She gave me a small, dismissive smile and walked to her car. I let myself stall for 10 more minutes. I drank the water. I let Caleb and Sloane talk, their voices a meaningless drone. I watched Trey Hollis's car pull away. I watched the DJ start a new, louder song. I had the recording. Noah had the photos. Keane had the order. I stood up. "You know, Caleb," I said, my voice suddenly clear. "I think I'd like to see those papers in the grey folder now." As he turned to get them, I sent the text to Keane. Now. It happened faster than I expected. The DJ had just started a new song, something with a bass line that felt like a punch to the chest. Then, silence. The music cut off mid-thump. Every head in the backyard turned. 2 police cruisers had pulled up in front of the house, their lights quietly flashing, painting the trees in strokes of red and blue. They were not using sirens. This was not a raid. It was an execution. A car door slammed. Avery Keane, in the same immaculate suit from his office, walked up the driveway. He was flanked by 2 police officers and a calm-looking woman I didn't recognize, who was carrying a briefcase. The party guests began to melt away, their excited chatter turning to nervous whispers. They drifted down the side path and out the front gate, not making eye contact. Caleb stepped forward, the grey leather folder still in his hand. "What is this, Mom? Did you do this? What's going on?" Sloane was right behind him, her face a mask of pale fury. "You can't be here," she snapped at Keane. "This is a private party." "Actually," Keane's voice cut through the air, sharp and cold as glass. "It is not. This is the private residence of Marjorie Hale." He held up a document. "I am Avery Keane, counsel for Mrs. Hale. I am here to serve you with a temporary protective order and an emergency possession order, signed this morning by Judge Rowan of the Port Oriel District Court." I saw Trey Hollis, who had been lingering by the patio, quickly try to slide a sheaf of appraisal documents into her large designer handbag. "This is insane," Caleb yelled, looking at me. "She's confused, Mom. Tell them you're confused." Sloane lunged forward, stopping just short of Keane. "This is our house. It's practically ours. You can't just kick us out." "It is not practically yours, Mrs. Ritter," Keane said, his voice dangerously quiet. "It is not yours at all." He motioned to one of the officers, who handed him a file. He pulled out 3 sheets of paper. "You claim this is your house," he said, holding up the first. "This is a printout of the registration for a shell company named T.H. Holdings, LLC, registered to your cousin, Julian Ritter, at a mail drop in Annapolis." He held up the second. "You claim you are managing the property. This is a copy of a fraudulent HELOC application, bearing a scanned forgery of my client's signature, and, more importantly, a notary stamp from a Ms. Darla Pike, whose certification expired in March of last year. That is a felony." He held up the last piece of paper. It was my blurry photo, blown up and printed in high resolution. "And this," he said, "is a text message you received at the Harbour Grill 2 nights ago. It's done. She has no idea. It appears, Mr. Hale, she did." Caleb's face went white. Sloane just stared, her mouth open, all the sound gone. The officer, who had been standing back, stepped forward. Mr. Hale, Mrs. Ritter. The order is clear. You are to vacate the premises immediately. You will have 30 minutes to gather your personal essential items, medications, clothing for a few days, toiletries. That is all. My daughter, Sloane whispered, her eyes darting to the front porch. The calm woman with the briefcase stepped forward. My name is Miss Alvarez, she said, her voice kind but firm. I am with Child and Family Services. I am here to ensure Piper's transition is as smooth as possible. You and I will go pack her bag together, and she will leave with you. This is not a custody hearing, Mrs. Ritter. This is just for today. Sloane looked defeated. The fight was over. The 30 minutes were a blur of movement. The officers followed Caleb and Sloane upstairs. I stayed on the porch, where Piper was now being calmly helped by Ms. Alvarez to pack her art supplies. She looked confused, but not scared. There was no yelling, no violence, just the quiet, methodical removal of a cancer. At the 30-minute mark, they were escorted out. Caleb wouldn't look at me. Sloane stared at me, her eyes so full of hate it felt like a physical blow. Ms. Alvarez walked with them, holding Piper's hand, to their car. They drove away. One officer stayed behind with Keane. The other went to his car and returned with a lockbox and a drill. He expertly changed the lock on my front door in less than 5 minutes. He handed the new keys to Keane, who in turn handed them to me. The metal was cool in my palm. They will have to schedule a time, with my office and police present, to retrieve the rest of their belongings, Keane said. The house is secure. Marjorie, the assets are frozen. He nodded, and he and the officer left. The street was silent. The only sign of the party was the dropped napkins on the lawn and the deflating balloons. Ruth came across the street. She didn't say, I told you so. She didn't say, are you okay? She just stood next to me. I looked at her, and I did not cry. I just took one long, deep breath. It felt like the first breath I had taken in 3 years. That night, alone in the quiet. I cleaned. I swept the floors. I took down the garish balloons and put them in the trash. I scrubbed the sticky rings off my porch rail. And at midnight, I went to my old bedroom, their room, and I dragged my heavy, comfortable armchair from the corner they had shoved it into. I moved it back to its rightful place, next to the window overlooking the sea. I sat down and watched the tide come in. My life was starting again. The Port Oriel District Court was not a grand room. It smelled of floor wax and old, damp wood. It was a place of function, not ceremony. I sat at the polished table next to Avery Keane, my hands folded on top of my good purse, across the aisle. Caleb and Sloane sat with their new lawyer, a man in a suit that looked too expensive for the room. Judge Gabrielle Rowan presided. She wore sharp-angled glasses and looked at everyone in the room with the same expression of profound impatience. Sloane's lawyer spoke first. His voice was smooth, a practiced, honeyed baritone. He painted a picture of a loving son and daughter-in-law, forced to take difficult steps to protect a sadly confused matriarch. He used the words forgetful, lapsing, and vulnerable. He suggested I was being manipulated by this new, aggressive legal team. My clients, he said, gesturing to Caleb and Sloane, were only ever trying to protect the family asset. Mrs. Hale's memory is not what it was. I looked at Caleb. He was staring at his hands. Then it was Keen's turn. He did not get up. He sat in his chair and spoke in a clear, cold, surgical voice. "Your Honor," he began, "we agree that Mrs. Hale is vulnerable. She was vulnerable to her son and daughter-in-law. Mr. Hargrove claims my client is confused. Let us look at the evidence of her confusion." He started with the HELOC application. He projected it onto the wall-mounted screens. "This is the application for a $50,000 line of credit against Mrs. Hale's home. It was submitted online. The defense claims Mrs. Hale is confused and not tech-savvy. We agree. She has never used online banking in her life." He clicked to the next slide. "This is the bank's internal access log, obtained under subpoena. It shows the application was submitted, and my client's accounts were accessed 34 times in the last 2 months, from an IP address registered to Mr. Caleb Hale's personal laptop." Caleb flinched, as if he'd been struck. He looked at Sloane, bewildered. Keen continued, his voice relentless. "This is the signature page. Our forensic analyst confirms the signature of Marjorie Hale was a low-resolution scan, digitally inserted onto the line. And this is the notary stamp of Ms. Darla Pike. Her notary commission expired in March of last year. Confusion does not forge documents. Your Honor, criminal intent does." Keen then introduced the subpoenaed phone records. A new projection lit up the screen, showing a text chain between Sloane and a contact labeled T.A. Holdings, her cousin. The plan was laid bare in blue and grey bubbles. They were not texts about helping me. They were texts about a sale, an off-market sale, directly to the Shell LLC for a price nearly 40% below market value. One text from Sloane was brutally clear. "We need closing in 30 days. Low appraisal is fine. It keeps the transfer low. We flip it in 6 months and split the profit." Sloane's lawyer was on his feet, objecting. "Irrelevant. This is a hearing about residency." "It is a hearing about fraud," Judge Rowan snapped, her eyes not leaving the screen. "And I find this highly relevant. Sit down. Counsel." Trey Hollis, the red-haired realtor, was called to the stand. She looked pale and small. Keen was almost gentle with her. "Ms. Hollis, who retained you to appraise the property?" "Sloane Ritter," Trey whispered. "And did you speak with the homeowner? Marjorie Hale?" "No. I was instructed not to." "Instructed by whom?" "By Mrs. Ritter. She said the owner was elderly and non-responsive, and that the family was handling all decisions." "Did she ever show you a power of attorney?" "No," Trey said, her voice cracking. "She just told me to be quick and to keep it off the public listings." "We did not need to call Piper. I would not have allowed it." Keen simply submitted the report from Ms. Alvarez, the social worker. The judge read it silently. I saw her expression harden. She looked up, over her glasses, at Caleb and Sloane. "The report states," the judge said, "that the child, Piper, shows significant signs of security and attachment to her grandmother. It also notes the child expressed relief that she doesn't have to keep secrets anymore." That was when the dam broke. Caleb put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. He looked destroyed. Sloane did not. She turned to ice. She stared straight ahead, at the judge. Then, she leaned over and hissed something at her lawyer, gesturing sharply at Caleb. She was cutting him loose. I could see it. She was pushing it all onto him. Judge Rowan had seen enough. The evidence presented today is, frankly, appalling, she said. The temporary protective order is extended for 1 full year. A criminal referral for conspiracy to commit fraud and forgery is being sent to the district attorney's office. A date for that hearing will be set. She looked at Caleb and Sloane, her eyes pure steel. You are to have 0 contact with Marjorie Hale. You are not to come within 500 yards of her or her property. This hearing is concluded. The gavel struck. As the room began to shuffle, Avery Keene was already at the clerk's desk, filing 2 new motions. What was that? I asked him, my voice hoarse. A formal petition for the restitution of all money withdrawn from your accounts, he said, packing his briefcase. And a motion to freeze any and all assets held by Mr. Hale or Mrs. Ritter, pending the outcome of the criminal trial. The house was quiet, but it was no longer an empty, lonely quiet. It was a productive quiet. It was my quiet. I reclaimed the sunroom, the one Sloane had filled with her dying houseplants and yoga mats. I had the floors polished, and I brought my industrial sewing machine back down from the attic. I hung a small, hand-painted wooden sign on the door, Blue Harbour Fabric Works. My first client was the mayor's daughter. She wanted a wedding dress, and she wanted it made of silk shantung. My hands, which had been clenched for 3 years, were steady, measuring, cutting, stitching. It was breathing. The thrum of the machine was my heartbeat returning to its normal rhythm. The work brought more than just money, though the money was essential. It brought the community. Ruth and I started a small group, meeting every Thursday morning in my living room. We called ourselves the Harbour Matriarchs. It was just 5 of us at first, all women over 60, all widows or living alone. We brought coffee and notebooks. We weren't a sewing circle. We were a strategy group. Ruth explained how to read public property records. Another woman, a retired accountant, taught us how to spot anomalies in bank statements. We shared information on affordable lawyers, on 2-factor authentication, on how to set up a living trust to protect our homes. We were turning our vulnerability into a fortress. Piper was allowed to visit, twice a week, supervised by Ms. Alvarez. Those were the hardest and best hours of my week. The supervision felt cold, clinical. But Piper was a bright light. She would run in, hug my legs, and immediately pull out her schoolwork. We would sit at the kitchen table, me helping her with her multiplication tables, her chattering about school, about her art class. I never, ever said a word against her parents. We just existed in this safe, warm bubble for 90 minutes. We made cookies. I taught her how to thread a needle. I let her be an 8-year-old. When Ms. Alvarez said, "Time's up," I would hug her, and my heart would ache, but I would smile. Protecting her was my new, most important job. I received a check in the mail, drawn on a new bank account. It was for $75. It was from Caleb. Keene informed me it was part of a new, court-mandated restitution plan. He had entered a 30-day residential program for a gambling addiction, something I had never known about. Something that explained the desperate, gaping hole of his finances. He was now in a financial management program. The small, weekly checks were the first payment he had made to me in 3 years. Sloane, on the other hand, was fighting. She filed a civil appeal, claiming the emergency possession order was unduly punitive. Avery Keene seemed almost happy about it. "She's overplaying her hand," he told me on the phone. "Her appeal just gives me a formal opportunity to file every single piece of evidence we have the text messages, The forgery analysis, the bank logs into the public record. She's cementing her own conviction. I took his advice and rebuilt my defenses. The day after the hearing, I had a locksmith not just for the front door, but for every window, the shed, the garage. I sat down with my bank manager and locked my accounts. We set up two-factor authentication. We put verbal passwords in place. I spent a week with an estate planner, the one the matriarchs recommended, and we created an ironclad trust. My house and my assets were no longer just protected by a lock. They were protected by layers of law. The orders for Blue Harbour Fabric Works poured in, vests for a groom's party, alterations on a vintage coat, a set of linen curtains for a new neighbour. It was as if the town had wrapped its arms around me. The stream of income became a steady river, and with it, my independence was no longer a memory, but a current, tangible fact. I even bought a new laptop. I had Ruth's son, a patient young man, teach me how to use the cloud, how to scan documents properly, how to use the new doorbell camera's archive. These things, the online portals, the digital files, the remote access, they were the tools they had used to try and destroy me. I would not be afraid of them. I learned to use them, to master them. A scanner is just a new kind of tracing paper. A secure password is just a new kind of lock. And a camera. A camera is just a new era needle, sharp and precise. And it misses nothing. The air in Port Oriel grew still, the way it always does before a nor'easter. The storm was gathering, but it was happening quietly, in offices and email servers. I received a message, not directly, but forwarded by Avery Keene. It was from Caleb. He wanted to meet with me. To apologize properly, he'd written. He suggested the old maritime chapel on the hill, the place we held my husband's memorial service. He was appealing to our shared history, to a time when we were a family. For a moment, I felt that old, familiar pull, the ache for the son I'd lost long before he'd drilled my locks. But the woman who now ran the harbour matriarchs, the woman who had taught herself to read financial statements, did not meet in quiet chapels. Keene? I said on the phone. He wants to meet at St. Timothy's, alone. Keene's reply was instant and sharp. Absolutely not. An apology is not a legal document. Marjorie. If he wants to talk, it is in a public place, during business hours, or it is in my office with his counsel present. No exceptions? Tell him your office, I said. And I want it in writing. The quiet victories continued. During Piper's next supervised visit, while Ms. Alvarez was in the kitchen getting her a glass of water. Piper leaned her head against my arm. We were looking at a pattern for a new dress. I like it here. Grandma, she whispered, her voice very small. Mommy is always loud now. She's always on the phone, and she sounds angry. She looked at me, her eyes too old for an 8-year-old. Do I have to go back? I held her tight. I couldn't answer that. But Ms. Alvarez, who had overheard, wrote it down. Her report to the court was filed the next day, noting that Piper was more stable, secure, and relaxed in my care. Sloane's aggression in the civil court continued to backfire. By appealing the possession order, she had invited the court to look deeper. The district attorney, building the criminal case, had followed the money from T.H. Holdings. They found it, Keene told me, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. The consulting fee. The LLC paid Sloane $50,000, the day after the fraudulent HELOC was filed. She never declared it as income. The IRS is now officially involved. It wasn't just my house anymore. It was federal tax fraud. The pressure began to crack the weakest parts of their conspiracy. Trey Hollis, the red-haired realtor, was facing the loss of her license and criminal charges. Her lawyer called Keene. She wanted a deal. She's offering to cooperate in exchange for a lighter sentence. Keene explained. And she has an email. He forwarded it to me. I read it on my new laptop, in my own sunroom. It was from Sloan to Trey, sent 2 days before the party. The subject line was Urgent, Port Oriel Closing. The body read, Trey, we need to expedite the closing. The owner is complicating things. Just complete the private appraisal and file the listing. The owner does not need to participate in this stage. We will handle her signature. We will handle her signature. The words were cold, impersonal, as if I were a piece of furniture to be moved. The final layer of the shell game was exposed. The secret buyer, T. Holdings was planning to flip the house too, was just another LLC. This one registered in Delaware. Its sole member, Julian Ritter, Sloane's cousin. It was just a loop, designed to wash the title and hide the profits. With this arsenal, Keene did not approach Sloane. He approached Caleb's public defender. He made an offer. We are preparing a formal settlement, Keene explained to me. It has 3 parts. First, Caleb signs a quitclaim deed, permanently relinquishing any and all current or future claims to your property. Second, he agrees to the full restitution schedule for the money he took, to be garnished from any future wages. Third, he must agree to testify truthfully against Sloane regarding the planning and execution of the fraud. And in return, I asked. In return, Keene said, we recommend to the DA that he plead to a lesser charge, no jail time, only probation and the addiction program, contingent on his full cooperation. I thought about it for a long time. I agree, I said finally. But I want it all in writing. I will not meet him. I will not speak to him. It all goes through you. The pieces were all in place. The criminal trial was looming. Judge Rowan, seeing the mountain of evidence and the offer of a plea deal, decided to force the issue. She scheduled a mandatory settlement conference, a final mediation, for next Tuesday at 5:00 in the evening. And then she added one final, unusual order. All parties and their counsel were to attend a negotiating dinner immediately following the conference, at 7 p.m., in the private dining room of the Gull's Nest. A dinner? I asked Keene. It's unorthodox, he said, his voice tight. But it's binding. She's putting everyone in a room, and she is not letting us leave until the papers are signed, the mediation and the dinner, all on the same day. It's the final move. Marjorie. The knot is about to be pulled. The Gull's Nest private dining room was suffocating. It was panelled in dark, heavy wood that seemed to absorb all the sound. There were 2 stacks of files on the polished table Keene's, which was thick, precise, and bound, and the one from Caleb and Sloane's lawyer, which was noticeably thinner. We were all there. Me, Keene, Caleb, Sloane, and their respective lawyers. Trey Hollis was also present, seated at the far end of the table by the door, as per the DA's request. She looked like she was attending her own funeral. A nervous young waiter entered to take our dinner orders. It was a grotesque parody of a civilized meal. The lady will have the... Sloane's lawyer began. But as the waiter leaned in to place a glass of water, The table was illuminated. It was Caleb's phone, placed face up beside his plate. A text message, the screen bright and clear for all to see. From T.H. Holdings. It's done? She has no idea. Sloane's head snapped toward the phone. Her eyes, wide with a new, wild panic, flew to Keene. Avery Keene smiled. It was the first time I had ever seen him do so. It was not a pleasant expression. "You seem surprised, Mrs. Ritter," he said, his voice cutting through the silence. "But that's where you've miscalculated. We've known about your pattern for some time." He looked at Caleb. "That text message, Mr. Hale. It wasn't from T.H. Holdings. It was sent by a state investigator from a burner device under a court order using the same number. T.H. Holdings used to communicate with you. It was a legal bait text. We just needed to prove that. Even now, even on the night of your settlement, you were still actively engaged in the conspiracy. You just confirmed it." Sloane made a sound, a choked gasp, and shot to her feet. She grabbed her purse from the back of the chair, her eyes darting to the door. "I wouldn't," Keene said calmly. He nodded toward the door. Sloane froze. The door to the private room opened, but it wasn't the waiter. 2 uniformed police officers stepped inside, followed by a detective in a suit. "Sloane Ritter," the detective said, his voice flat. "You are under arrest. We have a warrant for your arrest on charges of conspiracy to commit real estate fraud, forgery of a public document, and felony financial elder abuse." Sloane screamed, a high, thin sound of pure rage. "He did it. It was his idea. Caleb, tell them." The detective looked at Trey Hollis, who was white as a sheet. "Ms. Hollis, you are here as a cooperating witness. Who gave you the instructions to proceed with the appraisal and ignore the homeowner?" Trey Hollis stood up, her voice trembling, but she pointed a shaking finger directly at Sloane. Sloane Ritter. She directed everything. She told me the owner didn't need to be involved and that they would handle the signature. It was all her. That was the last stitch. Caleb made a sound, a deep, animal groan, and just collapsed in on himself. He slumped over the table, his head in his hands, and began to sob, his whole body shaking. While the officers were handcuffing a screaming Sloane, Keene slid a document across the table to Caleb's lawyer, who physically pushed it in front of his weeping client. "Sign it, Caleb," his lawyer said, his voice full of disgust. And he did, his hand shaking so badly he could barely hold the pen. "My son signed the quitclaim deed, giving up any right to my home. Forever." He signed the full restitution agreement, acknowledging the debt. He signed the cooperation agreement, pledging his testimony against his wife in exchange for the plea deal. Keene's phone buzzed. He looked at it, then nodded to me. "It's done," he said. "Judge Rowan, who has been monitoring this meeting remotely, has just approved the long-term protective order. The house title is being flagged by the recorder's office as we speak. No one can touch it." He got another text. "And Ms. Alvarez confirms the new arrangement. The court is granting you expanded, unsupervised visitation with Piper. Full custody hearing is pending, but it looks good." They took Sloane away. Caleb was taken by his lawyer into a separate room. I stood up. I looked at the 2 stacks of files. I folded my own papers, the signed quitclaim, the restitution order, and placed them neatly in my purse. I looked at Avery Keene. I knew from the first dinner, I said, my voice perfectly steady. And I've been ready ever since. The legal net was closed. The knot they had tied was not untied. It was cut. Cut by evidence, cut by law, and cut by the unbreachable boundary of a 62-year-old woman who had finally learned to use her own needles. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you are listening from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts. If you enjoyed this, please subscribe to Lily Revenge Stories, like this video, and consider hitting the hype button to help more people hear this story.